in North Korea. We took a page out of Nixon's ping pong diplomacy and used basketball as a way to get into North Korea and meet Kim Jong-un, who was basically just put into power after his father passed away.
Yeah, so first, this is, I saw it a couple of times. I saw even the episode when your founder, Shane, is kind of running. It still has a very strong impact every time I see it. Now, tell us a bit about yourself. Your life story is also a bit interesting and probably explains why you run Vice China.
So I've been with Vice for about 2.5, 3 years. Originally started off as an investment banker in New York. Decided New York was boring, moved to China about 8 years ago. And then basically when Vice wanted to come into China officially as a media company, they asked me to come on board. Now a lot of you might question, how does Vice, which is, as you can see, very edgy content, very raw, work in China because of the media censorship and everything. But I think Vice, we are culture, right? We consider ourselves the voice of global youth culture, and so our job, our goal is to basically find the right stories that is representative of local culture and help spread it across the world. So there's a lot of things that you can talk about in China, be it food, travel, whatever, that doesn't necessarily have to be along the lines of what is quote unquote not allowed in China, like politics, like military, economy. So, you know, it's been a bumpy ride. The Chinese government has given us phone calls here and there, has asked us to take down certain things, but I think the beauty of what we do is that we are so focused on youth culture, and because China as a country, yes, 5,000 years of history, but as a free country, as, you know, having come out of the Cultural Revolution, there's not a lot of identity for the young adults today. So I think what our goal is, and I think the reason why we come in now is such a good time in the development of Chinese culture, is that young adults really want to have an identity. They're very, very proud, they're very nationalistic, but they don't necessarily know where China comes in the global scheme. So what we're trying to do is help promote that culture, be it from Shanghai, from Beijing, from Shenzhen, from Wuhan, and give them a platform to really talk about what they feel is important to them, and then obviously help broadcast it to the rest of the world. Because I think what we focus on within the country is relevant to the local people, and I think if the local people don't even know what's important to them or they find it interesting, then obviously globally nobody knows what's going on. So that's the beauty of kind of how we have a global platform to be able to broadcast this.
Excellent. So I think people now much better understand Vice, and even though we have all these discussions about how we're all part of one big international, well, I'll reuse the word movement, there's still a lot of different types of peoples and usage in different stages. So let's now go for, I'm sure the audience really wants to hear your view, many certain things. For instance, we see now that content is going from long form to short form over the internet, and long form is coming from the TV to the internet, and you see that in the nature and the type of product, the media products on the TV are also becoming more short form-ish in nation, faster cuts, etc. What do you think will happen next to content? Is it going to be something in the forms? Is it something about the technology options, about interactivity? What's the next steps in the evolution of the content itself? Anybody wants to start? Hanan?
Yeah, I would like to say that what we hear here, I think, and we see from all the panelists here, is disruptive content, and the way content is moving from screen to screen. We really, I think, for a few years, most of us are saying that there is no such thing as TV and web. You know, I heard Bryant saying, we produce for the web, but their show is on HBO, etc., and going on. For the consumers, I think there is no such thing today as a distinction between TV and web. Everything is the same content, which you can consume in every screen you want. I think we in AOL are trying to educate the other sides of the business, advertising, etc., how to do it, because they still do not know, but we do see the shift and it is happening. And I think it's a fun time for us to be able to bring this disruptive content to so many eyeballs. I think if you connect the eyeballs that's watching on all of our platforms, it's amazing. And I want to say something to Louis, who's been disruptive like 50 years ago. We see so much disruptive content coming in so many genres, but we do not see it in kids, and I think it's time to do it, to find a way to bring, sorry. Okay, Oded will take it.
So actually, I want to ask Louis, do you agree with Hanan about the observation that the big disruption in educational content should be coming, or do you say we will never watch a full episode of Sesame Street on a mobile phone?
I would agree with that. I'd say it's kind of very interesting to have perspective of a lot of years. Sesame Street started off with very short segments that mimicked commercials so that we could actually capture the attention. Once our characters really proved their worth, we told stories. Narratives for children were really important. Now here we are again at a time when short forms are better bursts on mobile and on other platforms. And yet kids are used to 11-minute stories if you look at any other television program. So we have to really think a little bit about it. What our future, I think, at the workshop, I'm speaking for myself, is digital learning. There is an explosion in the opportunity to personalize learning, to find ways for each child to move at his or her own pace. And I think that is a real future for us.
I think this is a very interesting observation. I want to make sure I understand. What you're saying eventually is, okay, the forums are changing, they're getting short, etc., but this is not disruption. The disruption will come once we add another layer of personalization, etc., to continue. René?
So I agree, by the way, with what the previous guys are telling us, but I think that we need to understand that currently we cannot treat what Vice is doing or Maker and the talent doing as something as this, just more of the same or marginal different. It is a clear revolution that's happening, right? On talent, on creation, on distribution and consumption.
Okay, so is the revolution more focused on the content or the fact that...
It's on all parts of the value chain, right? And it's driven by people under 30. And I think there's a generation gap that we have never seen before. When we grew up and we had Danish television 1 and 2, Swedish 1 and 2, when MTV came and cable, it was relief, right? It was great. I could suddenly see some of your shows, I could see other things, but it was just same, different, funnier evolution of what were already there. What's happening now is fundamentally different. If we don't treat that as a different form, I think we are missing an opportunity. And just an example, you know, the way that content is creating now is very much like you said, when you had to break through with a 1-2 minute teaser back in the days, you need to start quick and then you can tell the story. But here it's personality driven. Right? The last 20, 30 years, whoever was big on TV was a star up here, and we all knew they were stars, and we could never reach those guys. Right? People are creating content, quality content today on the same wave as we are. We're looking them in the eyes, and we know we can be like them. We can become big stars if we have something on our hearts to tell, and because we have the distribution worldwide available right away. So there's a lot of things changing fundamentally in the whole value chain right now.
Yeah. So the change in the value chain, itself, I think we all see it, and it's a much more democratic ecosystem. But I want to ask you, René, now that you guys are part of Disney, etc., do you think it will be over like that, or the incumbents are going to bring all their force to try to stop it? I personally don't believe you can stop real change, fundamental behavioral change, but there are some people, like Hanan said, you still need to educate advertisers, and you still need to educate some of the big broadcasters. Do you think the trend will grow, or at some point they will kind of get to some sort of equilibrium?
So there's several questions in your question, but if you look at the big broadcasters, I think very few of them really recognize what's going on. They talk about it. When you meet a CEO for any big broadcaster, they will say, we know we're not catching people under 30, but really what keeps them alive is Champions League football or Premier League, right? If they didn't have those assets, they will die overnight, right? Full stop. So that's one part. On the advertising side, like Hanan mentioned, it's still a challenge for the whole industry, right? They've done something last 30 years that has worked really well. Right, to make that change will take time, but ultimately we as consumers will drive that change. The day we don't put on the linear TV, which is getting closer and closer, advertising money will disappear, right? They have to. And when I have conversations with Coke or with Unilever, they're totally aware of it, right?
No, absolutely, I completely agree. And Uri, you also wanted to comment on the disruption part?
Yeah, very quickly. I would kind of try to complement what Hanan said and say that aside from disruptive model within video, within what we know, as you know, the video type of content, and there's all kind of formats and models being created either by AOL or by the community at Makers or by Vice. And shall I say, content will heal the world. On the same paraphrase, the software will eat the world, so content is eating the world. They're just going field after field and creating new formats. But I think there's a big opportunity also in new content formats that are not just video, that are tapping on the engagement that consumers are experiencing, especially on mobile devices. For example, today people consume storytelling and stories through Snapchat. I took my brand and started to post on Snapchat, and it's very interesting. So you have I think there are opportunities for new platforms, content platforms, not just video, to tap on storytelling and try to create even, kind of new content experiences. And I see it as a great opportunity for entrepreneurs. And all the big content powerhouses, that some of them are sitting here, will potentially, will go to those platforms if they will be proven as successful. And I think even Vice acquired the company in order to experiment with new content distribution formats. So it is, I think, aside from the video world, which is, probably the most engaging type of content, there is still opportunities for new formats.
Yeah, and I think, by the way, this is also strengthening René's point that the disruption comes from all sorts of different points in the ecosystem. So then, at some point, some of the incumbents will have to have these elements to survive. It's just evolutionary. And I also wanted to say, you mentioned about content. I think we all agree in this panel. The conclusion about every panel like this is that content is king. I'm sure we all agree to that. So sorry for disrupting the punchline. Now, Bryant, you guys are disruption is written all over Vice. How much of it is like a planned? I mean, I know the founders, so I know some of the founders, so I know it's probably not that planned and thought. But how much of it is the disruption spirit affect the daily life of the people in Vice?
No, I think Shane, who's a founder, started 20 years ago. He put it best, is that back when YouTube was starting off, everyone was thinking platform, but nobody was thinking content, nobody was thinking pipeline. What do you fill that platform with? And so that's why Vice has grown so quickly over the last couple of years, is because we've always been creating content. Yes, we're a media company. Yes, we work with brands. We work with every brand in the world. But our number one focus is our audience. And that's the key, is that we create content, we tell stories that are relative and relevant to our audience. So I don't know if you guys attended Mark Wurst's speech yesterday, but he talked about authenticity. What we create at Vice is called verite documentaries. So we really tell the stories, we find the people, as René said, it's everyday people. It's you and I, we tell our own stories, we find our own history, and that is the engaging factor, right? It's because it's not a celebrity, it's someone that we can relate to. It's someone that is within our reach. And that's important because it creates something that you are able to relate to. And then, as Hanan said, in terms of advertising, brands nowadays, well, in China at least, they're still focused on TV, but TV is pretty much, to a certain extent, dying in terms of content and working and reach and everything. Engagement is very important, and I think digital content is a way to do that. In China, you have 600 million people online. 80% of that is via their mobile phones. So you need to create a platform that is, relevant to who you're trying to reach, your target demographic. And, we don't have the same kind of support as we did back in the, 80s, 90s in terms of governments funding culture, funding content. Nowadays, it's brands. Brands are the ones that tell people what they should do. They present a lifestyle. And that's, I think, what people don't realize is that, especially brands at least, they are trying to still reach a very, very vast audience, but that audience is very cursory, right? They don't have the engagement. If you go on digital, that's where they're really sitting there. I mean, people are traveling 2 hours to work, and everything that they're doing is on their mobile phone. So I think the disruption is coming through this new technology, these new media platforms.
And obviously, we all agree, I'm sure, that the disruption of this wave and so on will come from younger entrepreneurs and people, either creative media people or engineers and so on, they will probably bring the disruption. Now, Hanan, as, in addition to running the development for AOL in Israel, you also work with the local entrepreneur community. Do you recognize any themes of what these young guys are working on, what's interesting to them, how they can help you guys keep up to speed with all the changes?
Yeah, I would say we just opened a startup program called Nautilus here in Tel Aviv, where we see a lot of startups and try to accompany there for about a year and assist them in growth. And we've seen around 200 startups in the last 6 months. And I do see, besides other trends that are coming, because AOL is handling a lot of different sides of the internet, but around content, we see a lot of platforms for trying to start and to give the ability to create content in different ways. And I think it's in connection to what Makers and Vice is doing, like creating new, authentic voice directly to the people. And I think authenticity is definitely in there. Also in the shows that we made in the last 2 years, our tagline was like authentic voices, remarkable stories, because people want more to hear ourselves. We want more to hear ourselves than others. I just want one remark, I know we're short on time, about content is king. I think it's obvious, and of course it was there all the time, it will continue to the end of time. But I think in the last few years, there was a doubt around it. And for some years, distribution was the king, because we were building new pipes, and I'm not talking about only our platforms and platforms around video, also Twitter and Facebook and YouTube, which are technology companies at its base. And I think what's happening today is that the content owners are taking their power back, and we're going to see a lot of unhooking from those platforms. And also when I'm looking at you guys, I see, you have a lot of power in YouTube and Twitter and Facebook, but you have a lot of power of yourself on your own pipes, and it's changing everything. Now that the pipes are there, mostly, besides advertising, and so content is king again.